The snow fell steadily outside the grand windows of the Sterling Heights mansion, each flake catching the warm glow from the crystal chandelier that hung majestically over Sarah's dining room. She stood in her pristine kitchen, her hands trembling slightly as she adjusted the garnish on the honey-glazed ham for the third time. Everything had to be perfect tonight. Everything. "Sarah, where's my navy tie, the one with the silver pattern?" Jason's voice echoed from upstairs, sharp and impatient as always. She closed her eyes for a moment, steadying herself against the marble countertop. "It's in your closet, second drawer on the right," she called back, her voice gentle despite the knot forming in her stomach. She glanced at her reflection in the stainless steel refrigerator and quickly smoothed down her emerald green dress, the one Jason had picked out because it was slimming, as he'd so kindly put it. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 7 o'clock. Mr. Sterling would arrive any minute, along with the other guests from Jason's firm. Sarah had spent 3 days preparing this Christmas Eve dinner, researching Mr. Sterling's favorite dishes, polishing every piece of silverware until it gleamed, arranging and rearranging the centerpieces until they looked like something from a magazine. Jason appeared in the kitchen doorway, adjusting his cufflinks with the precision of a man preparing for battle. At 35, he still carried himself with the arrogance of the college quarterback he'd once been, though his hairline had started its retreat and his waistline had expanded considerably since their wedding day 8 years ago. "The wine glasses better be spotless," he said, not bothering to look at her as he inspected the dining room setup. "And please tell me you didn't use too much butter in the potatoes. We can't have Mr. Sterling thinking we don't know about portion control." Sarah felt the familiar sting of his words but forced a smile. "Everything's perfect, honey. Just like you wanted." "Good, because tonight is crucial for my promotion, Sarah. Crucial. I need Mr. Sterling to see that I'm executive material, that I have a stable home life, a wife who—" He paused, his eyes scanning her from head to toe with barely concealed disappointment. "A wife who represents the company well." The doorbell rang, its melodic chime cutting through the tension like a knife. Jason immediately straightened his shoulders and plastered on his most charming smile, the one he reserved for clients and superiors. "Showtime," he whispered, but there was no warmth in it, only calculation. Sarah watched him stride toward the front door, his confident footsteps echoing on the hardwood floors. She took a deep breath, checked her lipstick one last time in the hallway mirror, and prepared to play the role of the perfect corporate wife. Little did she know that by the end of this snowy Christmas Eve, everything she thought she knew about her life would crumble like the delicate snowflakes melting against her windows. The sound of voices filled the foyer as Jason welcomed their guests, his laughter booming with false enthusiasm. Sarah smoothed her dress one final time and walked toward the sound, ready to begin what would become the most important performance of her life. Sterling entered the foyer like a man accustomed to commanding every room he walked into. At 62, he carried himself with the quiet authority that came from decades of building his construction empire from the ground up. His silver hair was perfectly styled, his charcoal suit impeccable, but it was his eyes that caught Sarah's attention. Sharp, observant, missing nothing. "Mr. Sterling, welcome to our home," Sarah said warmly, extending her hand. "I'm Sarah. Jason has told me so much about you." "The pleasure is entirely mine, Mrs. Patterson," he replied, his handshake firm but respectful. "Your home is beautiful. Thank you for having me on Christmas Eve." Behind him came 3 other couples from the firm, the Hendersons, the Clarks, and the Washingtons, all dressed in their holiday finest, all eager to make the right impression. Sarah guided them into the living room, where a fire crackled invitingly in the stone fireplace, casting dancing shadows across the walls lined with family photos and Jason's various achievement awards. "Can I get anyone drinks?" Sarah offered, already moving toward the bar cart Jason had insisted they purchase last month. "We have wine, cocktails, or perhaps some hot cider." "Wine would be lovely," Mrs. Henderson said, settling into one of the plush armchairs. "This house is absolutely stunning, Sarah. You have exquisite taste." "Thank you, but I can't take all the credit," Sarah replied, pouring the wine with steady hands, despite Jason's intense stare from across the room. She could feel him watching her every move, ready to swoop in if she said something he deemed inappropriate. As they moved to the dining room, Jason positioned himself strategically next to Mr. Sterling, launching into an animated discussion about quarterly projections and market expansion. Sarah served each course with graceful efficiency, but she noticed how Jason's compliments about the food were always backhanded. "Sarah's really outdone herself tonight," Jason announced, as she placed the main course on the table. "Though I keep telling her she needs to try some of these recipes herself, instead of just cooking for everyone else." He laughed, but the joke landed with an uncomfortable thud. Mr. Sterling's fork paused halfway to his mouth, his eyes flicking between Jason and Sarah. "The meal is exceptional, Mrs. Patterson. You're clearly a talented cook." "Thank you, Mr. Sterling. Cooking has always been my passion," Sarah replied, but Jason quickly interrupted. "Well, it's good she has hobbies to keep her busy while I'm working late at the office," he said with another forced laugh. "Speaking of which, sir, I wanted to discuss the Morrison account." Throughout the dinner, Sarah noticed a pattern. Every time she spoke, Jason found a way to redirect the conversation back to himself or subtly undermine her contributions. When Mrs. Clark complimented the centerpieces, Jason mentioned how much time Sarah had to focus on decorating. When Mr. Washington praised the wine selection, Jason made sure to note that he had guided her choices. But Sarah also noticed something else: Mr. Sterling's growing discomfort with Jason's behavior. The older man's jaw tightened each time Jason made a disparaging comment, his responses becoming shorter and more clipped as the evening progressed. "Sarah, this dessert is incredible," Mrs. Henderson exclaimed as Sarah served her homemade chocolate souffle. "You should open a restaurant." "Oh, she's much too busy for that," Jason interjected quickly. "Besides, she'd need to lose some weight before she could be the face of a restaurant, right, honey?" He reached over and patted Sarah's hand in what looked like affection but felt like ownership. The table fell silent. Sarah felt her cheeks burn with humiliation, but she managed to keep her smile in place. Mr. Sterling set down his spoon with deliberate precision, his eyes fixed on Jason with an expression that could freeze hell itself. "I think," Mr. Sterling said slowly, "that Mrs. Patterson would be successful at anything she chose to pursue." The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Sarah excused herself to clear the dessert plates, her hands shaking as she carried them to the kitchen. Through the doorway, she could hear Jason's nervous laughter as he tried to recover from what was clearly a misstep. As she stood at the sink, gripping the edge of the counter, Sarah caught her reflection in the window. Outside, the snow continued to fall, and she wondered if this would be her last Christmas Eve in this house, though not for the reasons she expected. After dinner, the group gathered in the living room where the Christmas tree stood like a sentinel in the corner, its lights twinkling against the backdrop of falling snow outside. Sarah served coffee and liqueurs, while Jason regaled everyone with stories from his college football days, desperately trying to recapture Mr. Sterling's attention after his earlier blunder. "You know what?" Jason suddenly announced, jumping to his feet with the kind of manic energy that made Sarah's stomach drop. "I think it's time for presents. I have something very special for my beautiful wife." He pulled out his phone and opened his Instagram livestream, his thumb hovering over the record button. "This is going to be epic, guys. You're all going to witness something amazing." "Jason, maybe we should wait," Sarah started, but he was already recording. "Hey everyone, Jason Patterson here, live from our Christmas Eve party." His voice took on that artificial enthusiasm he used for social media. "I'm about to give my wife Sarah the most thoughtful Christmas gift ever, and I wanted to share this special moment with all my followers." The guests exchanged uncomfortable glances as Jason's phone screen showed the live viewer count climbing. Sarah felt her heart hammering against her ribs as Jason grabbed her hand with theatrical flair. "Come on, honey, everyone needs to see this." He practically dragged her toward the front door, the guests reluctantly following behind. Mr. Sterling remained seated for a moment, his expression unreadable before slowly rising and joining the procession. The cold Denver air hit them like a slap as Jason flung open the front door. There, sitting in their circular driveway under the glow of the porch lights, was an enormous industrial wheelbarrow, the kind used on construction sites. It was painted bright yellow with heavy duty emblazoned across the side in bold black letters. A large red bow sat perched on top like a cherry on a very bitter Sunday. "Ta-da!" Jason shouted into his phone, making sure to capture both Sarah's shocked face and the wheelbarrow in the frame. "Merry Christmas, darling. This is the heavy-duty industrial-grade model, maximum weight capacity." The silence that followed was deafening. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Sarah stared at the wheelbarrow, her mind struggling to process what was happening. The live-stream comments were already flooding in, and she could see Jason's follower count climbing as people shared the video. "I figured this was the only way to get you off that couch and into the gym," Jason continued, his voice growing louder and more cruel with each word. "Maybe now you'll finally lose those 50 pounds we've been talking about. What do you think, Mr. Sterling?" Pretty creative, right? He turned the phone toward his boss, expecting the kind of masculine approval that had always validated his worst impulses. But Mr. Sterling's face was a mask of disgust and disbelief. The other guests stood frozen, their holiday cheer evaporating in the frigid air. I mean, come on, Jason pressed on, oblivious to the horrified expressions around him. She's been complaining about wanting to exercise more, and now she has the perfect motivation. Heavy-duty equipment for heavy-duty work, am I right? That's when Sarah began to laugh. It started as a low chuckle, barely audible over the wind, but it grew stronger and more confident with each passing second. Jason's smile faltered as he realized this wasn't the reaction he'd expected. The guests watched in fascination as Sarah walked slowly toward the wheelbarrow, her laughter echoing off the snow-covered trees. "You know what's really funny, Jason?" she said, her voice carrying clearly in the crisp night air. The phone was still recording, still broadcasting live to hundreds of viewers who were witnessing something far more dramatic than they'd bargained for. She turned to face him directly, looking straight into the camera lens with eyes that sparkled not with tears, but with something far more dangerous: knowledge. "What's funny is that you still have time to worry about my weight, considering how much money you've been spending on expensive dinners with Tiffany." She paused, letting the name hang in the air like a sword. "You know Tiffany Morrison? Mr. Sterling's executive assistant." The color drained from Jason's face so quickly that even in the porch light he looked like he'd seen a ghost. His phone trembled in his hand, but he kept recording, trapped by his own arrogance and the hundreds of people now watching his world implode in real time. "Sarah, what are you?" he stammered, but she wasn't finished. "Don't try to deny it," she continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. "I saw the messages on your iPad, the one that syncs with your phone. The romantic dinners at Le Bernardin, the weekend getaway to Aspen, the jewelry receipts from Tiffany & Co. How poetic that you bought Tiffany jewelry from Tiffany's, by the way." Mr. Sterling's face had gone from disgust to pure fury, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. Jason looked desperately between his wife and his boss, realizing that his carefully constructed life was crumbling faster than he could process. "But since we're being honest on Christmas Eve," Sarah said, stepping closer to the camera, "I have one more gift for you, darling. This house, the one where you just humiliated your wife in front of your boss and broadcast it to the world, it's not ours." The words hung in the frozen air like icicles ready to shatter. Jason's face went from pale to ashen as Sarah continued, her voice steady and clear, each syllable captured perfectly by his still-recording phone. "This house is in my mother's name, Jason. It always has been. She bought it as a wedding gift for me, not us, me, and put it in a trust with very specific conditions." Sarah's smile was serene, almost peaceful, as she delivered each devastating blow. "One of those conditions is that I have the absolute right to remove any unwanted occupants at any time." Jason's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. The live stream comments were exploding, hearts, shocked face emojis, and fire symbols cascading down the screen as viewers realized they were witnessing the most epic takedown in social media history. "Sarah, you can't be serious," Jason whispered, finally lowering the phone slightly, though it continued recording. "We've been married for 8 years. This is our home, our life." "Our life?" Sarah laughed again, but this time it was sharp as broken glass. "You mean the life where you criticize everything I do, belittle me in front of your colleagues, and sneak around with your boss's assistant while I play the perfect corporate wife?" She turned toward Mr. Sterling, who stood rigid with barely controlled rage. "I'm sorry you had to find out this way, Mr. Sterling. I discovered the affair 3 weeks ago, but I wanted to be absolutely certain before I said anything. Your assistant has been using your corporate credit cards for their little romantic escapades." Mr. Sterling's voice, when he finally spoke, was low and deadly calm. "Is this true, Patterson?" Jason's eyes darted frantically between his wife and his boss, sweat beading on his forehead despite the freezing temperature. "Sir, I can explain." "Explain what?" Mr. Sterling stepped forward, his presence suddenly intimidating despite his smaller stature. "Explain how you've been having an affair with my personal assistant? Explain how you've been stealing from my company? Or explain how you just humiliated your wife on social media for the entertainment of strangers?" "It's not stealing," Jason protested desperately. "Tiffany said she had authorization to use the cards for client entertainment." "Client entertainment?" Mr. Sterling's voice rose for the first time all evening. "You think I'm an idiot, Patterson. Tiffany Morrison has access to my personal accounts because she handles my private affairs, my doctor's appointments, my dry cleaning, my mother's nursing home payments. She's been embezzling from me, and you've been helping her do it." The other guests stood transfixed, watching the drama unfold like spectators at a car crash. Mrs. Henderson had her hand over her mouth in shock, while Mr. Clark was discreetly recording with his own phone. Sarah walked back toward the group, her heels clicking confidently on the snow-dusted pavement. "I called my mother this morning, Jason. I told her everything. About the affair, about how you've been treating me, about tonight's little surprise. She gave me full authorization to change the locks and remove you from the property immediately." "You can't do this!" Jason's voice cracked with desperation. "I have rights. I'm your husband." "You're right," Sarah said calmly. "You are my husband, which is why I'm giving you 10 minutes to pack whatever you can carry and leave. I could have called the police and had you arrested for trespassing, but I'm feeling generous. It is Christmas Eve, after all." Mr. Sterling adjusted his coat and stepped closer to Jason, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than any shout. "Don't bother coming to the office tomorrow, Patterson, or ever again. I'll have security escort you out if you set foot on company property. You can pick up your final paycheck from HR. What's left of it after we calculate how much you and your girlfriend stole from me." Jason looked around desperately at the other guests, searching for any ally, any support, but found only disgusted faces and averted eyes. The live stream was still running, now with over 2,000 viewers watching his complete and utter destruction. "This isn't over, Sarah," he said, his voice shaking with rage and humiliation. "You think you're so smart, but you'll never survive without me. You're nothing without me." Sarah tilted her head slightly, considering his words with the same attention she might give to a mildly interesting weather report. "You know what, Jason? You might be right. I might not survive without you." She paused, letting hope flicker in his eyes for just a moment. "But I'm certainly going to enjoy finding out." Mr. Sterling cleared his throat, drawing everyone's attention. When he spoke, his voice had returned to its usual controlled tone, but there was something new in it. Respect. "Mrs. Patterson," he said formally, "I find myself in need of a new executive assistant. Someone with integrity, intelligence, and the ability to handle difficult situations with grace." He glanced meaningfully at Jason's phone, still broadcasting their conversation to the world. "The position comes with a substantial salary, full benefits, and the kind of respect that should be standard in any professional relationship. Would you be interested in discussing the opportunity?" The offer hung in the air like a Christmas miracle wrapped in perfect timing. Sarah looked at Mr. Sterling, then at Jason's horrified face, and finally at the phone that was still recording everything for posterity. "Mr. Sterling," she said with genuine warmth, "I would be honored to discuss that opportunity with you. Thank you for seeing my potential when others couldn't." Jason's face contorted with rage and disbelief. "You can't be serious. Sarah doesn't know anything about business. She's just a housewife." "A housewife who managed to uncover a sophisticated embezzlement scheme that I missed," Mr. Sterling replied coolly. "A housewife who organized tonight's dinner with more professionalism than most of my executives show in board meetings. A housewife who handled your public humiliation with more grace and intelligence than you've shown in your entire career." The snow continued to fall, creating a pristine white backdrop for Jason's complete downfall. Sarah walked over to him and gently took the phone from his trembling hands. "I think that's enough live streaming for tonight, don't you?" she said, addressing the camera directly. "Thank you all for witnessing this moment with us. Sometimes life gives you exactly what you deserve, exactly when you need it most." She ended the live stream and handed the phone back to Jason. "Your 10 minutes started 5 minutes ago. I suggest you hurry." Jason stood there for another moment, looking like a man who'd just watched his entire world collapse in real time. Then, with the defeated posture of someone who finally understood he'd lost everything, he trudged toward the house to gather his belongings. The guests began to murmur among themselves, the shock giving way to a kind of awed admiration for Sarah's handling of the situation. Mrs. Henderson approached her with tears in her eyes. "Honey, that was the bravest thing I've ever seen," she whispered. "We all knew he was treating you poorly, but none of us knew how to say anything. Sometimes we have to save ourselves," Sarah replied softly, watching through the window as Jason frantically stuffed clothes into garbage bags upstairs. Mr. Sterling stepped beside her, his voice gentle but firm. "Mrs. Patterson, I want you to know that what I witnessed tonight, both your husband's behavior and your response to it, tells me everything I need to know about your character. The job offer is genuine, and I hope you'll consider it seriously. I will, Mr. Sterling. And please call me Sarah. 20 minutes later, Jason emerged from the house dragging 2 large garbage bags and a suitcase. His face was red from cold and humiliation as he loaded his belongings into the yellow wheelbarrow, the very gift he'd intended to shame his wife with. "This is poetic justice at its finest," Mr. Clark murmured to his wife as they watched Jason struggle with the unwieldy cart. The wheelbarrow's wheels squeaked and protested as Jason pushed it down the driveway, his expensive suit now wrinkled and snow-covered. He looked back once at the warm, glowing house where Sarah stood surrounded by people who respected her, then continued his lonely journey into the snowy night. Sarah closed the front door with a soft click and turned to face her guests. The fire was still crackling in the living room, the Christmas tree still twinkling with promise, and for the first time in years, she felt truly at home in her own house. "Well," she said with a smile that reached her eyes for the first time all evening, "who's ready for some hot chocolate and Christmas cookies? I have a feeling this is going to be the best Christmas Eve I've had in a very long time." As laughter and conversation resumed in the warm house, Jason continued his trek through the Denver suburbs, pushing the heavy-duty wheelbarrow through the snow, carrying nothing but his belongings and the bitter taste of his own cruelty. Behind him, the house glowed like a beacon of everything he'd lost through his own arrogance and betrayal. Sometimes the best Christmas gifts come wrapped in justice, tied with the ribbon of consequences, and delivered by the very people we underestimate. And sometimes, the heaviest load we carry is the weight of our own choices. If this story of Christmas karma touched your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible stories of justice and redemption. Drop a comment below and let me know what city or state you're watching from. I love connecting with viewers from all across America. Your support means everything.